probably one of my most important videos that I want to talk about today, which is something I guess I've become aware of having done this mentorship program over a couple of years, and that's this systemic visa issue that's not really fit for purpose, where on one hand we have universities in Australia encouraging and getting financial reward um, for international students coming to Australia, and that's sort of propping up the university sector. And on the other hand, we then train people up in various skills, and for me, it's data science that sort of is what I've been exposed to. But this is sort of across different areas. Is international students are coming to places in Australia, getting taught up, and then uh, qualifying and completing their studies, but then there's no real pathway then to roles. You're going out into an open market where companies don't really want to deal with visa issues and sort of see it as problematic. So I think that's a real challenge that a lot of international students have, and I guess this video is about my advice of what you can do if you're in that situation, and a lot of it applies even if you're not in that particular situation. But I think it's just one that's become really prominent for me um, in the discussions that I've had. So my advice, okay, number one is don't try and tick every box. I think a lot of times, especially in the data science space, there's so much to learn, there's so much technical that you can develop in, that there's almost this sort of want to tick every single box that you can possibly tick. And what I would say to that is your technical ability, you've been exposed so much within your data science degree or in terms of your studies that just to add additional components of that is probably missing the main area that you need to focus on, which is sort of those non-technical skills. And so I would encourage you to go, okay, I've got this technical base. What can I do from the non-technical side to improve my chances of getting a role? Secondly, break an unsaid assumption. And this might be controversial, but I think there is a subconscious thought that somebody from overseas may not have the communication skills to come into an Australian company and be able to communicate and discuss problems. And so anything that you can do to demonstrate excellent communication, or if you feel like you don't have excellent communication skills in English, then that's where you need to spend that time in enhancing those skills. And some of the things I think you can do to show that is making sure that the cover letter, resumes, emails, that the English is really, really good in that. Without being over the top in use of words, it can be simple in vocabulary without, but it needs to be technical. It needs to be technically correct. So making sure some mistakes I see is kind of pluralization and things like that. So make sure that there's written excellence in cover letters, in CVs. I think potentially recording videos on LinkedIn that you have available to show yourself explaining something that's complex simply would be great. And I think also if you can call the HR department, the recruiter of jobs that you're applying for, and having a really good conversation that shows your communication and shows how easy it is to communicate with you. I think they're all different ways of showing that communication won't be a problem if you're hired. Find a way to. We have talked about technical capability, but I think there's ways of actually showing that you're technically capable without sort of adding to the technical arsenal that you have. And that's, potentially add something to your cover letter. So have the cover letter that says, this is why I'm applying, this is who I am, my resume contains additional information. Why not under that have details of a technical piece of work that you've done where you're demonstrating that technical skill? I think that's potential. Or just really sort of elaborating on a data project within your CV where it makes sense. So my fourth piece of advice is to create. uh, potentially you can volunteer and get into not-for-profits as somebody who can assist, and it might not be that necessarily leads to a job with that not-for-profit, but it might then actually add you to that sector and help you identify other roles within the not-for-profit sector that you might be able to take on. If it doesn't, then at least you've done something for good and you've got a data project that you can talk about more. So that's potentially something that I think has legs, is if you can find a not-for-profit and say, I'm here, I'm willing to volunteer, I have these really good data capabilities, I think that could be something you do. Number 5 is searches. So set up searches, just be super aware of what's out there and what's available, and be smart. Spend a lot of time developing, a standard application set, a standard application cover letter, standard application resume, but leave blanks to be able to give it the flavour of the job that's being applied for. So if there's 2 types of role you're applying for, then maybe have 2. But I guess what I'm saying is, there are some roles that come up where you really want to spend, hours making sure it's right and it's the best representation of you that you can have. But I think that if you start applying for a lot of jobs and you're spending that time all the time, then there's a weight that comes with that. And so if you can take that weight away and say, okay, look, I only spent half an hour applying for this because I'd already spent the 3-4 hours, the 2 days, the whatever it might be at the start, getting my cover letter and resume the way I want it. I think that then it makes it easier to apply for roles without this sort of big feeling of, oh, there's another role, oh, that's going to be a lot of my time. You can quickly get those out, and if invites to interviews don't come as a result, then you feel like you haven't lost a lot of time, or you haven't invested a lot in it. Number 6, this is just for the ladies. Apply. So many times, women will see the gaps they have to a role, and they go, I don't tick every box, I won't apply. I don't want you to do that. I want you to put your hat in the ring. It's really important. It's something that men do much more than women. Men will say, oh, I can do that, generally speaking. And so the more you ladies can throw your hat in the ring, don't feel like you need to tick every box. And in terms of box ticking, in terms of gaps, I want to talk about, these are my 7th and 8th points, is there is a difference between 2 types of gaps. One is an adjacent gap. And what I mean by an adjacent gap is something like Python. So this is my example. So say somebody's looking for a developer and the skill set's, a data scientist, and the skill set that they're referencing is Python. And you have a lot of experience in R. That is an adjacent gap. You have shown, and you can show, and you can demonstrate that you have the ability to learn Python, and you have you can demonstrate that through what you've done in R, and identify then how you would, I guess, upskill in Python in the relative short term. And that leads me to my 8th item, which is attacking gaps. So some gaps are gaps. If you are from the, if you've done a university degree and you're applying to a shipbuilding company as a data scientist, there's a huge gap. You don't know anything about shipbuilding, or you might not know anything about the health sector company that you're applying to. So, as a grad, or as anybody, even myself, when I joined the electricity sector, when I went for that interview, I knew that I had this huge gap in knowledge of this national electricity market we have in Australia. But the way that I tackled that was by being very specific about how I was going to get up to speed. And not just up to speed as in, I'm going to, on the first day that I start here, I'm going to start getting up to speed, but almost in the, I've already started a Coursera course on this industry, or I've already started doing this. By the time I start, I will be here. I think that's such a it's something that somebody in recruiting wants to hear. They want to hear that you understand that gap, because generally everybody doesn't tick every box. It's hard if you put an advert out. It's hard to get somebody that does tick everything. But if you can show that you understand which boxes you don't tick, and that you have a plan for attacking those, I think that's a really good narrative, and it makes the recruiting person feel better about hiring you. So that's my eight points. I'm going to just cover them really quickly. Don't try and tick every box. Don't try and get more technical skills. You've got a lot of technical skills. I don't think that's a pathway that's going to necessarily help. Break the unsaid assumption around communication. Find a way to demonstrate that technical capability that you already have. Create opportunities by doing projects or volunteering time with not-for-profits. Make sure you're across searches and get that one, make it an easy way to apply for roles. Ladies, please apply. Identify what are adjacent gaps that you already have technical capability that give you the benefit to be able to pick up another skill. And finally, attack whatever gap is clear in what you're applying for, and have a plan as to how you're going to attack it and make it go away. So that's my advice. Really appreciate any thoughts you have on it, any challenges with that. It's a big issue. I see. I think it's a systemic issue that isn't necessarily fair, but it's the way that it's set up now. And so I wish you all the luck in this journey, and hopefully some of those points help.